Every day, you essentially pay your dues by doing the harder thing when it's the right thing to do. Justin, my man, how are you?
I'm great.
Welcome back to the podcast. You had a sneaky guest appearance on a panel for men's gymnastics, but here you are back.
I don't even remember that. Okay.
There's me, you, Mike Burns, Mark, like a bunch of us when like the, I think one of Minnesota was on the chopping block and we had like an emergency podcast, but here you are transformed.
Podcast. I love that.
Yeah. Like a state of the emergency. Please save us. Save us all.
I'm sure that would be a little intense. I know that Mark and I were probably on opposite ends of the spectrum, and Mike is always floating somewhere in the middle, but was just so drowning in his emotions for the program being on the chopping block.
It was probably more of a therapy session for Mike than anything else.
I was just going to say, did we just sum it up in 10 seconds there? Yeah.
Yeah. We tried our best, but it's still not working out. That's the summary of that podcast. But let's go not to negatives like that. So good to have you on, man. I think you're in a new role and a new exciting stuff. And I'm a big fan of, I'm a big fan of college gymnastics. I'm a big fan of women's college gymnastics, and I'm a big fan of doing whatever I can to help promote the sport. So yeah, I want to have you on because I think one, people don't know you had a big life before you were coaching at Alabama. And I'd love to explore that and share with the large audience of female watchers who know you were quite an athlete yourself. But then of course, I want to pick your brain on, what's going on now and what's exciting for you and stuff like that, if you're ready to dive in.
Yeah. It's funny is I don't think my own team knows who I am. They know I went to the Olympics a long, long time ago. That's about it.
Yeah. I actually was thinking about this less because we have a common friend, Dave Durrani, obviously. And so we were talking a lot a couple days ago. And I think, man, I remember growing up and watching like Dave and you, and then John was like near me, Horton. And I remember like, please explain if I'm wrong here, but two things happened when I was in high school that were madness. One is I think you did a laid out triple double, right? Competing in Illinois. Was that true? Is that accurate? Was that you or someone else?
I did not lay it out tucked.
Tucked. Okay. Yeah. Tucked. So I remember watching that with a couple of my friends and I was like, yeah, I don't want to do floor routines anymore. I was like, this is stupid. Right. And then I think maybe it was Jason Furr. Did he do a quad pike? Someone did a quad pike into a pit and it was like,
quad pike. I was there. I'm in the background of that.
That's video. What it is. Yeah. And it like broke the internet. Right. Because we were like, dude, how can someone like grainy internet footage on like a potato film? And we were just like, dude, this is madness. This is absolute madness. So I think I remember that's the first time I was like, it's Justin Spring, guys. No joke. And if you can flash back to those days, man, I thought I was risk taking, but like, how the hell do you get to a point where you're doing triple doubles and like people are throwing crazy stuff like that? Like what happened in your career that got you to that level of adrenaline?
I probably got to throw some compliments to Carlos Vasquez. I think his coaching style really, really clicked with mine, but then I think it clicked with all of ours. Like he was preparing guys for the next wave of gymnastics, which was this uncapped code, right?
Yeah.
Open-ended code where it's like, some guys like me that didn't maybe necessarily have the refinement, the form could really just take off, pun intended, right? Like we could just start open-ending all the skills. And so for me personally though, like, so he fostered an environment that I was able to grow and love that part of gymnastics. I grew up on trampoline. But really I think everyone has different talents, right? And my talent was, and I wish I could say I worked for this. I didn't really have much fear. Like somewhere I connected doing the crazy skills with being kind of a badass. And I wanted to be cool. Right. You know, and in a sport of men's gymnastics, that's a tough combo, right? Being cool and then, so like, but I found there was a way you could be cool. You could throw the big crazy skills that a lot of other people were scared to throw. And then you got like, man, that's crazy. How do you do that? And that was the praise I needed to be like, got it. So this is how I become cool in the sport of gymnastics.
Yeah.
Pushing that threshold was my thing.
Yeah. Were you in the Thomas era too of like whip tuck Thomas, laid out Thomas?
I in my Olympic.
Yeah, that's what I thought, right, dude? Like that I think caps it for me of like craziness. My best friend did a whip tuck Thomas and a laid out Thomas, and he actually like concussed himself really bad one time. And I'm just like, after watching that, I'm like, bro, this is not a good idea. This is not a good idea.
My string bean legs, man, 2 left landings. I was like, sign me up. Because I did a layout Thomas. At one point, I did a layout Thomas down the side as a side pass.
Yeah. He did tuck Thomas, laid out Thomas 1 and 3. And he just got like all the stupid bonus. And he did 1.5 punch full Rudy, which was like 19/10 of bonus.
I remember that code. Yeah, that's great.
That all CCC.
You have to land the damn thing. You had to land 2 passes. Amazing.
Dude, it was hilarious. So we had
eccentric contraction is brutal.
Yeah, dude, for real. It was hilarious. We had like him who was just gaming the system, right? He did Thomas, whip, and like one more dismount. And then we went to MIT when they had a program. And these dudes, we were like, yo, this is cheating. They would do a back layout, a front full, and then like Maltese press, wide arm press, swallow press through and get like E. And I'm like, dude, this is not fair. This is not fair. Change the code.
That was with Rifkin, right?
He
was the coach back then. Man.
Yeah. Throwbacks, right? So what's crazier for you? Like triple doubles on floor, or like back in the day, what was like, is there anything that you were like a little like gut pit nervousness for, or like you were pretty much good to go on everything? Any skills that like actually rattled your cage a little bit when you first tried them?
I think the first time you have to put a skill like that on hard is a moment. I still remember the first time I had to put the triple double on a hard surface. You know, at that point, only one other person had ever done that. It was the Rejong Song, and it was like 8 months earlier. So it was kind of a big moment. And then probably the first time I ever had to put a my Souk triple full or Kaz double full on hard. And because of our vault setup at Illinois, I never got a chance to do that in the comfort of my home gym. The first time I ever did it was on podium at Pan American Games in 2007. But I killed it, but I still have the video. Went really well. Yeah. But that was a moment. It was just like podium training. And I was like, I guess we're going to do this now. Like, here we go. Like, all right.
The absolute YOLO moment.
Yeah.
And speaking of iconic moments, I think the other thing I remember is like you have some insane shot of you doing a laid out half and half out on rings, right? Like at the Olympics. Is that something I'm like burned in my memory too? Is that you or someone else? Like this epic shot of either parallel bars or rings of like you, like a wide angle zoom. And I remember seeing that like cover on the MySpace days, you know, when that was going around. I could be wrong here. Is that true? Am I wrong there?
There might be there's a shoot that's on the wall at the Olympic Training Center.
That might be it.
Of me on rings, and everyone rips me apart like that's like a no credit invert. And your toes are like, it's a dynamic skill, you jerks. I'm doing a shoot to hand. Like
look at the straps. I'm working hard.
For years, I came back as a coach, and everyone was like, I got like 9 off. I'm like, I hate all of you. I'm like, stop it.
That's cool. Yeah. So I think the people in the gymnastics world in college need to know that, like, man, you had a pretty crazy career, right? Obviously Olympics, stuff like that, and then worlds and stuff like that. And I feel like, did you always know you wanted to go back into coaching, obviously to Illinois first? Like, was that always in your radar? Or was that like, nah, and then you came back? Like, what was the thought process there?
It was a means to an end, honestly. It's funny though. I grew up my whole life saying that I wanted to be a teacher because I think I always really valued my teachers as leaders and influencers in my life. And coaching was a way to make that with a salary that I could really support a family in college. So I was like, oh my God, perfection. But it really happened by accident. It was Illinois. We only had 2 coaches when I was graduating. They opened up the 3rd coaching position for me to keep me around so I could continue training there for the Olympics. I think that concept is crazy enough that people don't realize we're a team of volunteers, y'all. Like other countries that kick our butt in some events, like all over the world, like at the Olympic Games, their full-time job paid for and supported by the government is to be the best at curling, taekwondo, gymnastics. For us, I had a full-time job as an assistant coach while training for the Olympics. And we all did. Like, so it was a means to an end at that point. And I started to really love it. And then came off and won retirement later, and then just the cards aligned, and I was able to take over the program basically 10 years after graduating. It was crazy.
Yeah, and obviously, like people like myself and others who did college gymnastics, I went to Springfield. Like I have so much respect and daps to you for like sticking it out and doing a program like that's hard. Like my time, I went from like 16 to 15 to 13 to 12, right? And it was just like slowly watching, like that's like a huge part of my life, man. Like my best friends are from college. I had the best times ever, and like you feel like the sand slipping through your hands, right, when you're watching these programs go down. But a big shout out to you for continuing to stick it out. And we're still hanging there. I mean, Simpson's new, right? We got a couple new ones in D3 that are pretty sick. So we're not extinct, but we're clawing around. I
hope it's not a dead cat bounce. It's just a crazy climate in college athletics right now.
It really is. Yeah. And it's tough. It's tough because you obviously want to see guys have a channel to keep going and keep training. But to the backside of this, we'll get to it. But like NIL and like other ways of sponsorships actually gives me more hope than ever before that like guys can get some support to pay for their training or pay for supplements or pay for tape or pay for something that I do have a little bit more faith. I don't think leaning on the NCAA is the goal for men's gymnastics. I don't know if that's a great long-term solution, but there's an in-between at least that we could figure out something, you know?
Yeah, and some Evo is the thing that's happened down in Florida has been super helpful. At least there's a funded position. Like, it's not enough, but it's something.
It's a short-term bridge.
Yes.
And then so Illinois for how many years? Forgive me if I'm wrong here, but
well, I started coaching in 09.
yeah.
The head coach until last year, 2022. So
Yeah, cool. And so shout out to Jan Inber, by the way, who's a friend of ours that is mutual.
Love that guy.
Jan might be one of my favorite humans that I've ever worked with before. That dude is
he's a pretty unique, grounded, solid individual. Yeah.
That dude's gritty too, man. That dude's gritty.
He is. Yeah.
And so let's kind of start on just the Illinois stuff. Is like, so when coaching and doing stuff, like what were like the main takeaways or lessons that you were like drawn to coaching, but you like felt like you developed your coaching styles even more? Because I feel like that'll lead into the conversation at Bama.
Well, I think that like anyone, I took what I'd known as I went through my own program and just kind of, that's what you start with. There's your template. And then as things went wrong or problems arose, and I'm like, man, why are we having this conversation again? Something needs to be put in place. There's a process that's missing. There's something gone wrong. And I just, honestly, that's what I did. Yeah. Rapid fire, my first year or two. And I reached out to anyone and everyone because I didn't have the answers. I read all the books I could, but in the end, like you really learn on the job. As I'm sure a lot of people will tell you, we had a talented team and I was putting out fires. And then, so, somewhere down the road started really putting together a philosophy and realizing that I can't communicate that enough as far as on the front end of what expectations are and what they look like, what it's supposed to be like, sound like, be like at any moment, or specifically at very critical moments during practice. And so you start having those conversations and you start priming and prepping everyone. So now you're not a coach that's just yelling when you see stuff go wrong and you're putting out fires. It's the conversations are, hey, we've talked about this. This is way below the line of what we've set as our expectation to be great. Fix it or you're out of here. Like you're able to just be a lot more calm in your approach. Not to say that I'm calm, I'm a very high energy person, but I think the messages are better received when it's not the first time someone's hearing about it. Because there's nothing worse than being like, I didn't know I couldn't do that. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so really laying the platform and over communicating, and to the point where almost 2 years ago, I was able to use an app and put like the phases of every element of within my program. So like you could look at a year of my program as a snapshot,
right?
Cultural development, strength development, skill development, routine development, team development, interpersonal development, the recruiting timeline. And you go, so like, as you track through like a month, you know exactly where we're at and which phase of which category. And so it's just like, this is where we're at. And then you can dissect the details as you dive in deeper. But I think that's really important to know, because now more than ever, everyone's got so much garbage going on in their life. And so to know exactly what's going on, where we're going, especially this generation, they want to know why, they want to know how, and they want to know why again and again and again and again.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd love to dive into a couple of those like really kind of key coaching pieces there. One is communication, right? Which is like something I see across all people who had really successful careers themselves, as they had great communication lines with their coach. And then now in a coaching role is like how important it is to, communicate the plan, but also like be able to take a step back when maybe things aren't going well. And like, all right, how do I like express this in a good way? Not just like, when I growing up, I literally just like yell, yell at someone to get something done and get back on the bar or whatever. Like that doesn't like sink in well. So can you maybe speak to more about the communication lines that you had that were successful there and kind of how that's transferring now?
Well, I think always like stating your intention, I think one of my favorite concepts, one of my favorite books is Good to Great. And I think this defines so much of what athletes struggle with, especially nowadays, because like in any given moment, you're going to have a really good turn or a really good practice or a really good routine. Well, the problem and frustration with good is that what place do you get when you're good? Like third place, but good feels great.
Yeah.
It's not great. And so this, I think, is 9 times out of 10 where you get like misalignments of coaches' expectations versus where the athlete is. Yeah, I did a good routine. Why are they on my ass again?
Yeah.
Like, because we're trying to be great.
Yeah.
And then the disconnect is a lot of times the athletes don't know what even great looks like or what it takes to be great. And so laying that out in explicit detail so that they understand the scope of the work that it takes. Because I mean, let's be honest, like half the athletes are like, I'm here at practice. Like, what more do you want from me? I showed up.
Yeah.
Like, God, it's just the first start. Like, and then we're going to get prepared. And that's like really hard work and doing the extra drills. And then like doing all the physical, like, the foundational stuff of the prehab, the rehab, the strength conditioning work, and then all the routines, and then doing the extra routine when that routine actually still wasn't good enough. So now you're prepared, but you're still not ready. And I can't tell you how many times I left a meet, and I might just have to coin this phrase, like, we walked into that meet so prepared, but we weren't ready. And that's the psychological element of being excellent, right? So like, how do you work? Because that has to be there too. You can't just do all the drills and the physical work and think that you're ready to win a championship. You're out of your mind. There's the team dynamic. There's the individual mental preparedness for the intense situations that a competition are going to throw at you. And so you can get a team physically prepared, but then they're still not ready. And so to do both of those things is incredibly difficult. And that's where you have to challenge your people constantly, day in, day out, and leave them sometimes in a state of unknowing, but then there's always a follow-up. You always have to provide clarity afterwards. Like, we didn't just make you feel like trash throughout this practice because we wanted to be jerks today. We did this because we need you to know what it's like to feel this way and then still be able to kind of rise above it when a competition throws this feeling at you, inevitably this weekend or in 3 months from now, and so like, otherwise the athlete's like, my coach is just an a-hole. And then, then you're a jerk, and they didn't really learn anything from that experience. But like, making your athlete struggle has been scientifically proven to be the only way that we grow and get better. You have to struggle. Now, how much, is really important. There's a sweet spot, right? You can't just
crush people,
be unsuccessful for weeks on end, months on end. That's not going to do anything, but they have to struggle if they're going to get better. And then you need a debrief to explain, what did that feel? And really, it's just asking them questions like, how did you feel like that? How did you grow from that? What did you learn from that? That's honestly, we just do that every day.
Yeah, man. I love that phrase you said, like the psychological state of being excellent, right? That's pretty iconic, right? Because I feel like a lot of people are striving to that. And I think especially in sports and gymnastics, is like, people are not afraid of doing the work, like the extra hustle, the extra routines, but like the mentality of like, okay, my life is consumed around trying to be excellent, right? Trying to be excellent in my craft, which for some people that is like, the extra 20 minutes of prehab rehab. For some people, it's going to bed an hour earlier so they don't feel like garbage the next day. For some people, it's saying no to a lot of extracurricular activities when all their friends are going out, because I need to be ready to have the extra edge, right? And I love that too. And I think it ties in together well, which is like, the communication is so important, because I think that the best coaches I see, the best programs I see, they level set expectations at the very beginning of like, why are we here as athletes and what are we doing, right? We are here to approach a common goal of getting to nationals or winning or whatever. And like, that is our standard. That is what we want to do. So all the choices we make and all the things we expect of you are in line with the fact that you have that goal too. And I personally find, I'd love your thoughts on this. I think a lot of issues come up when there's a misalignment of goals. When the coach thinks one thing and the gymnast thinks one thing, then in the club world, to make it resonant for people, the parent thinks something else, and people are running in 7 different directions, And so like, I think that that's one of the more important things, is like a clear outline of why we're here and what we're doing and what the alignment of our goals are,
I couldn't agree more. It allows you to push, right? Like, if your goal is to just like be in the mix, then we're just gonna have a great time at practice. There's no reason to challenge anyone. But like, if you're trying to win, extraordinary results takes extraordinary effort. I said that was a quote under my core value for hard work. As I was there, fighting allows my spin on just hard work. Like, like, it's too hard or it's so hard. I can't tell you how many seniors that like finally had the light bulb go off, and like what we were really challenging them. It was actually Andrew Margolis one time about a philosophy of training like you want to compete. And it was just, he looked at me one day in his senior year and was like, wait, every time in practice when I raise my hand, you want me to approach that routine like it was a meet? And I was like, yes, Andrew, for the 4th year in a row, that's exactly our standard. That's exact. And he looked at me finally with true sincerity and kind of looked at my eye and goes, that's really hard. And I was like, I think you finally get it, because it absolutely is. And before, everyone just nodded their head and went back to practice.
Right.
And so it was like, in that moment, he finally got it and was like, holy hell, that's really hard to do. And I was like, well, winning a national championship is really hard to do. Yeah. And so like, learning lesson for me, why did it take him 4 years to truly understand that concept? And like, I'm like, damn, I did something wrong there. That wasn't his fault. That was my fault. If your athletes aren't getting your message and you've said it to them 1,000 times, the problem is not necessarily with them. It might be, but ultimately as the coach, that's your delivery problem. That's you not delivering the message or crafting the message appropriately. And so like, I'm like, damn.
Yeah. And something I think a lot about that really well is like the communication actually allows trust, right? That's what you're trying to bank is trust that, I think a coach has that job to communicate and build that trust and rapport, but a coach also has a really important role to know the dosage appropriately and know when to push and when to pull, which I think is sometimes another issue people kind of come into is like you said, like it's all about the optimal dose of like, it's got to be hard, it's got to be pushed, it's got to be strained. But there's sometimes when you got to know when to pull people back from the edge a little bit, whether you're on injury risk or burnout risk, or you can just see it's not really jiving that day. But I think that like those two things together, the trust and that kind of awareness is what allows you like, dude, like you get the most progress when it's the darkest and the hardest and you don't want to be there and you're sore. And the last thing you want to do is stay for 20 more minutes and do an extra set of basics.
That's when it matters most.
But that's when you're at your level, whether it was at the Olympics or whether it's in college for men's, because obviously it's so competitive, or even now in women's, it's like everyone's doing most of the same stuff. Like everyone's training hard, everyone's kind of doing it. But like, where do you get 1% over this much better from the last day? It's when you want to leave early and not do the stupid rehab stuff and not stay there and listen to some sort of like mental toughness talk. Like that's where it really happens, But
there's also like there's also mental fortitude that's built within that too. Like I remember like the fractional details of like going to bed a little bit earlier or not going out that one time or doing extra couple like ankle rehab, like how much do they physically accumulate to making you that much better? Like, I don't know, but what I do know, and I remember from my own experience after 4 surgeries leading into the Olympics was like, I remember I turned into a different person from a psychological approach to my Olympic training when I finally picked up the keys because as a party animal my whole life, I was always ready to have some drinks and hang out with friends. But the 8 months finally leading up to the Olympics, I remember being proud to grab the keys and like, Olympic trials coming up. I'm going to be the DD. And even my girlfriend, who eventually became my wife at the time, was like, whoa. And I was like, those reactions, like they kind of, they started to make me feel invincible in my journey again. After I had just come off tearing my ACL and then had 2 ankle surgeries, I became like unstoppable. And it almost felt like I had started building up equity, not just physically in my physical process, but in my mental approach to being really psychologically and emotionally grounded and ready for an Olympic trials where I was physically a mess still, and then going into an Olympic Games.
Yeah. Again, back to it, like the psychological state of being excellent, right? Like is someone who's pursuing excellence stay for 4 more. And even if you're not drinking, you're just there till 2 a.m. Or does the person pursuing excellence go home and go to sleep because they know
that you're better than this moment? It's just you have something more important to do right now.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And I think that's so important, right? Which is like the people who I meet in my life, whether it's business, whether it's coaching, like the people who are like completely ferociously, relentlessly attacking a goal they care the most about, they have this like just cocoon where it's like, well, I'm doing me versus me for me. It's not for the outside noise. I'm not better than anybody else. I'm not trying to like flex on anybody, but I have a goal and I relentlessly pursue this. And I need to give shout out to Dave, right? Dave is someone who I actually look up a lot to because he was like that when he was training as I got to know him more. And he's still like that now. He's like, I'm trying to build a business. I'm trying to work really hard. I'm trying to be a good dad. And he relentlessly is attacking those things just as hard as he probably was during the Olympics. And it's like, damn, those people are like inspiring. You know what I mean? Someone who can really shut the noise out and just hustle towards their goal is sick.
You're talking about Dave Durante.
Yeah.
He's a one-of-a-kind human being, without question. I mean, we won a medal, and he like, Dave, he's one of the most selfless human beings as well. Like, I can't sing Dave Durante's praise enough.
I agree.
And
what he's done with
is incredible. Yeah.
His like ACL story, right? For those I've told in the podcast, and he said this before, but like, trained his whole life to go to Stanford, the whole 9, first day tore his ACL. And he was like, okay, I can get really good at rings. And of course he was like, that was his thing after a while. And even when it didn't work out the way he wanted to, he was like the number one. I remember watching that Olympics and seeing Dave on the sideline going nuts, even though it didn't work out the way that he wanted to. Like, again, back to selfish. You can't think of somebody even more, on your side than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's sick. He's a good dude. Shout out to Dave. And I forgot what we were talking about. Yeah. So Dave expresses, right, the psychological like aspect of being excellent, relentlessly focused towards his goals. And I think that plays into communication, trust. You build your team around that goal, and then you can relentlessly push towards that. And when all of it caves in and like you're on a Saturday afternoon or Saturday morning workout, I remember vividly doing 8 a.m. circuits with my team, right? Where everybody was not going out. We were all just waking up at the butt crack of dawn to do these long ass circuits. And Greg Monaco from Temple was our assistant coach. And the first day of practice, he stood up there. He's like, listen, D3 school. There's no scholarships. We're going against D1 teams. He's like, we got a long ass hour here. If you don't like it, go home. It's fine. No shame, but like, get out. And he's like, oh, okay. This is real out here, man. This is real. And that's sick, right? To be a part of a group like that is electric.
It is.
And then, so Illinois, and then what made or what happened with the transition to women's to Alabama? Because that's what most people came to the podcast for, is not the Justin and Dave kickback story, but the future of you in Alabama and stuff. So maybe share the journey there.
Yeah, I mean, I went to Illinois. So much of my identity and my own legacy is still tethered to Illinois, and I love Illinois. It was just me like looking at Minnesota, Iowa, and then for a small time, William and Mary dropping their programs, right? Like in COVID, I'm like, all right, we're averaging one a year. Statistically, this career, I'm essentially a CDs. I'm a compact disc salesman right now. Like
when the iPhone came out, you're a CD comp.
I'm selling CDs right now. I'm like, some people still have them. They're in some of the older cars, but like, this is a very acquired taste. Like this isn't going in the right direction. So I just saw the writing on the wall, and it's really hard to, how do you leave something that you love in your great position for something else that when you're still employed and doing it and loving and like invested in that, like opportunities don't really come by. Sure. Like I had a few that I'd sought after. It was never the right fit. And it just didn't make sense to leave what I had, even knowing maybe where it was going, to take it. And that, and then cue a text from Ashley, and I always thought that I could get into women's coaching. I shared a gym with the women's program for 20 years at Illinois, and saw what they did, and saw what, and would often think like, I would totally do this or that, but like, not my place. And so got the opportunity, she opened the question, and then it blew my brain open. I was like, oh my God, this would be something worth making a transition for into women's coaching. It's a storied, historical, great program, one of the greats, right? But also, Ashley, I just know who you work for after I've been my own boss for 13 years is a huge piece. And Ashley is one of the most composed, grounded, focused, and thoughtful human beings I've ever met. I enjoyed her relationship with her husband when she was at Illinois for 10 months, and just knew that could carry on, and was excited about helping her take over a program and make it our own. And I think we had a short Zoom after just to test the water. She wanted to see where my philosophies were from a coaching standpoint, because I think that is important. Leaders don't need to be balanced. Leadership teams do. Yep. But and so you can have a lot of varying differences on a staff, but what matters most is are your values aligned? And so I think once we saw an alignment of values in the way that we approach a program and our coaching style or whatever, it was it was game over. That's sweet. At the end of that call, I was just starting the process, and she was like, well, pretty sure this job's going to be yours. So it's kind of like balls. And I was like,
yeah, it's happening.
Like what? Like you just like, and then,
maybe.
Yeah. And my wife had been listening through the door during the Zoom call, and I opened the door, and she had always been that goal line defense. Yeah. Like any opportunity, not like this isn't right for us. I opened the door, and I was like, oh, you've been here the whole time? And she was like, I think this is the right opportunity for us. And I was like, holy hell. I was like, oh, no, like that's where like my heart fell in the pit of my stomach initially, because I thought of leaving Illinois, kind of like when I left competing, like when I told I was going to get the head coaching position at 26-year old, it wasn't the gravity of the responsibility that was coming forward. It was that I'm done being a competitive athlete now. That was the hardest, right? So like these crazy moments.
Transitions. Yeah.
So,
I hear you, man. It's tough, right? It's tough to tear away from something so deep in your heart, whether it's competing to coaching, one school to another, men's to women's. But at the same time, like I think everybody has a respect and a love for what you did, and it's just a new chapter. Like that's how I view it. That's how I saw it when I saw the announcement. It's like, all right, this is a natural progression of Justin as a human, and like shout out,
Yeah. And I was really excited and full disclosure, a little frightened before, of wondering what the differences are. I still remember studying the names of the team on the way in. I didn't want to walk in and feel like I didn't know the team, which is funny because that to not have the names memorized would be that would be acceptable. I think I was like trying to overcompensate for me not knowing what to expect walking into a women's program.
Yeah.
And Dave, I shit you not, when I walked in, the first thing out of my mouth was, "There's no ring tower." Because and I know that's so silly, but like, and then Ashley, this is hilarious, tells me months later, she's like, "I thought you were talking like a championship ring tower." Like, talk about total
the audacity of this clown.
Because, you know, a still rings tower is such a prominent feature in the gym. It's the tallest thing.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, every gym I've ever walked into my entire life had a ring tower.
That's home. It's like your safety blanket, you know?
I was like, "No ring tower here," you know, like,
where's the horse? It's not in the back.
It was just kind of a funny thing of like, this is a whole new world for you, dude.
Yeah.
And then it stayed awkward for about two more minutes, and then it was fine. It was fine.
And so I'm curious for that, which is like, what is the biggest transition point, or like, what do you have to learn the most? Like, what was so different from, because I know for a fact, men's gymnastics is a different animal than is women's for many reasons, many of them good. But like young boys are not young girls and vice versa. So like, what did you have to like adjust to the most?
So at first, not that much, right? I've had many surprising moments throughout my last 8 months, but at first, because of the way my coaching philosophy, you know, it's like there's no blanket statement or policy for even two people, like, you know, and I think that's what I was so nervous about is for the last 20 years, I have never not walked into my space and known my athletes really, really, really well. Right. I know them as people. I know them how to push them. I know how to communicate with them. I know what pisses them off, i.e. what to avoid. Or sometimes what to step into, depending on what we're trying to get
a little bit.
Yeah. You know, so like, I didn't know these human beings.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, was the scariest part. And so that relationship building process became so important, but there were so many other things going on. So that was the hardest part, I think, for me, was like, I'm coaching these athletes, but I don't know them as people or as athletes. And I'm like, how do you coach a person that you don't know?
Yeah.
You know, which is your biggest problem with camp. So like it started off as all positive, keep things going, you know, and then start to figure out what are the problems that need to be fixed and really learning who they are. And so I think that so that made I think you're just working with your people, right?
Yeah.
So that was easy. Now, generally going from men to women, that's where the surprise moment. So like, I forget, it was a recruiting weekend that started right out the gate. And the stick position was, I'm just like, sticks were important back in men's gymnastics.
Yeah.
Oh my God, with the 10-0 cap and a landing deduction being undeniable, not subject. Well, I would say that's not true, but I've seen some 10s with big hops and you go there.
You won't let the gym that let us on fire for that one, so we're going to avoid that.
It would be undeniable, and I think that without question, it still absolutely is the most undeniable deduction in women's college gymnastics is a landing deduction, because it's cut and dry. You can see it, and so I'm like, stick percentage has got to go through the roof. That's got to happen, because inherently, I think it's the most variable. Like you're going to assume you're going to get your routines to where they need to get. Now we need to make sure that like we're sticking at 90% plus on those things. And so I just started playing a stick game on tumble track. And the first skill, Dave, what would you do if I said, you know, I'm going to throw you off a cliff if you don't stick this skill off tumble track? What skill would you do?
You do a stretch jump, bro.
Stretch jump? No, it has a flip, I guess.
Oh yeah, back tuck.
Back tuck. All right. What about a front entry?
Front half.
Yeah, the Branny, right? You know, front half, because you can see it the entire way, almost more than a back tuck.
Yeah.
So I said front half. Front Branny is the most undeniable. If I had to put my life on it, even more than a back tuck.
You've never done front Brannies? They're going all over the place.
I cannot tell you how many of them fell off the mat.
Dude, that's like when you do the stick game on trampoline and you ask for a half turn and people are like off the mat all over the place.
And to see their faces lined up at the back of the tumble track.
Terrifying.
They're like, at the gate, I'm like, you know, we did straight jump, half jump, full turn, and that was all fun. And then it was like, all right, let's start flipping front half.
Yeah.
And then I didn't realize in the moment, but they were like, this dude is out of his mind.
Yeah.
But in my brain, I'm like, this is the easiest, most undeniable thing you could possibly do. I mean, I had girls that compete front double fulls on floor, go like on the Z axis and do a front half. And I'm like, huh.
The same with a back half, man. You ever tell someone to do a back half? Just a simple back half? Terrifying.
I fought that battle for 5 months.
But I work with a couple girls.
Because a back half is the last piece of spawning on a back 1.5, which is our 10-0 vol, your chamber 1.5. And so like we had to break down. I mean, I had private lessons with small groups to break down a back half because they want to hollow, duck their head. I don't know why that's so ingrained. Like this position, twisting. And I'm like, I'd be scared to death to do trampoline too if I was completely lost the entire time. I mean, so like we had a lot of stuff to break down with air awareness, spotting, and landing mechanics, and just in air mechanics. It's like I became a trampoline coach in a lot of ways for the first couple months. I'm like, how do you expect to spot and land? How do you expect to stick undeniably big tumbling passes, full ins, 1.5s on vault if you don't see the ground? We went from like the girls to me like I just close my eyes. I'm like unacceptable.
I pray.
Like, you close your eyes.
The man above, Justin.
You don't have anything to look at. Yeah. So, and that I remember saying that all the time. Like I would be scared too.
Yeah.
To do things that are outside of my routine, and so that kind of opened up this bigger picture of like expanding the breadth of their gymnastics. Like, just because you do if you do a front double full punch layout or a lay double full, like you should be able to do lay punch half. Lay punch full, lay punch Rudy, lay punch double full, double full punch. And they're just like, why?
Yeah.
And I'm like, because it develops this like much broader understanding of where you are, how to bound out, how to spot, how to manipulate your body within your little pass, because you might be over amped, your legs might be jello one time. In those moments, you now will be able to work and make adjustments so that your gymnastics can be undeniable despite varying external circumstances or internal circumstances. Because your adrenaline's through the roof or your legs are tired or anything in between. But if you only know how to do your pass exactly the right way when it's exactly feels perfect and your body's exactly, like what a recipe for disaster when something's a little off, like right? Like what are we crazy? So like,
and the wind's blowing from northeast only with a sliver of sun in the light.
Yeah, that's why I hate superstition. And like, so I was like, we got to break all this down. Like I want you to like rain, sleep, dark, light, after a strength circuit, be able to run over the floor and go lay punch double full, or and like to be able to work that and make the adjustments, so you know how to make the adjustments so that you're never on your butt on this pass, whether you're tired or too amped or whatever. And so I had fun doing that, and they despite being scared to death, I think a lot of the time really embraced it, and a lot of them got better. And I'll never forget my moment, like when one of our athletes saw the ground coming out of her full into her half, and she landed, and she didn't stick. It was really, she goes, I saw the ground before I landed. And I'm like, yeah, it's supposed to, that's how it goes. That's how it's supposed to be. But that came through a lot of progressions. And so that was one big one of, I just didn't know that they were so dialed in. And I think them having a huge say and opinion in their training as well has been something that was really different. When you're seeking peak performance, like the athlete has should have a lot of input, because if you're going to safely push the boundaries of what a person's capable of, you're going to need to know how and when to do that. Like if they don't have an input on numbers and reps and like, and again, that comes with a conversation beforehand of like knowing that like, hey, this is a push week. You're going to be exhausted. We're still going to try to get a routine done. But if any time that you don't feel safe, like we can't push that threshold. Like safety is first, most, and always. But like we have to learn how to do our gymnastics and our routines when we don't feel great. Yeah. And there's a time for that, and it's not going to be always, but this is that week, right? And so and them learning to communicate and have an opinion about their training and when the time is right to do things was also another process. Which I wish I could get some of my guys to shut up, like, stop telling me how you feel all the time. I know, like it's ring strength. It's going to be hard. I'm aware you can't lift your arms above your head anymore. Go do another Maltese push planche. Like, right?
2 more, please.
2 more.
I hear 2 things in there that I think are really important to pull out. One is on the first piece you talked about is like the importance of really taking time to get to know the athletes, right? Like you in a new setting or any coach who's working with it. I feel like sometimes we underappreciate how like nuanced people are. And like, yes, there's one training program. Yes, there's one way to do it, but you really have to understand people are so different, man. Some people love to push, some people like to pull back, some people need motivation, some people need like that can do it on their own. And like the more you individually know the athletes, know who they are as humans and what they're driven by, the more, the success of that trust is built, but also like you have tailored programs to what they need
to be an effective coach for the person. Yeah.
It seems like common sense, but it's unfortunately like not as common as you would think to take the time to really understand the person.
It's hard. Take the time. It's hard to do this.
Yeah. It's easier just to yell blanket statements and have everyone follow one program, right? And then the second thing you said, which I think I've heard from Brett from Maryland and many other people too as well, is like, even though you're in a high level environment, college, NCAA, elite, whatever, JL club level 10 elite, like, man, basics and going back to fundamentals never goes out of style, right? Like, and I think the best thing I ever heard somebody do that we did a lot in college was just like twisting ladders, right? Like you should do a layout, then a half, then a full, then a 1.5, double full, 2.5, then go all the way back down. And the coach should be like, all right, do a double full and then do a half. Like, and you should be able to go backwards and forwards, whether it's bars and basics, whether it's twisting, whether it's just your Chanko where your hand's going around off. Like, I feel like the higher people get up the level, they drift away from basics, not realizing that the people that were the most elite actually do more of that, not less,
We made a switch with a girl in her dismount. She'd been doing a double back off beam all year. But it's like, again, with the stick, like that's hard to stick.
Yeah.
And like with the difficulty swap, like we wanted to go to a double full, which like that's a major dismount switch.
Yeah.
But like she doesn't compete one on floor. But she was able to do it like basically in a practice. Cause I think she was one of the ones that like we did a lot of this twisting mechanics with and trampoline time. And like she picked it up immediately. And and you could have never have done that had you not gotten them comfortable with, again, the twisting ladder, as you so speak, right? Like just, and now she's sticking that double full after a beam dismount, like left and right. And I'm like, bam,
let's go.
It's a game changer. Like, so yeah.
And closely related to that too is I definitely want to touch and double back on the the aspect of a team cohesion unit as a leadership role. I think that's a really important topic too. Is what was it like moving to a much more team oriented role within the coaching staff, but also at Bama, man. I know for a fact college programs you have like athletic trainers, you have doctors, you have nutritionists, you have mental. Like there's so many things around you that you probably like. I know for a fact probably were not the existence when you were growing up as an athlete. So what is that like stepping into an environment where like there's so many more people to talk with and interact with?
When Ashley hired me, she was like looking at like a student code, or and I was like, all right, staff's complete because you already have like a director of ops, right?
Yeah.
It's like, what are you talking about? We're like halfway done, and then like 5 more managers later, a student coach, a volunteer coach, an assistant trainer to the head trainer. I'm like, holy hell! Like this is unbelievable. Like
army.
Our staff was like 20 people deep, and then halfway through the first couple months of practice, I'm like, we need more managers. This is chaos. Like it's amazing how right. Like, I mean, when I left Illinois, we had 3 coaches and a trainer. That was it.
Yeah.
And we had other support services. Like we didn't even have a director of ops. We didn't have I was like doing meal prep plans and like on the road, like we're going to eat at the Chili's because I don't want to deal with it. Like it was really like, it was crazy.
Bro, the grind of an $8 stipend in college gymnastics, let me tell you.
Don't get me started on our per diem for breakfast.
All right, next thing. So what's it like with a team of people?
So I'm going to say maybe an unpopular opinion. Like it's amazing how many resources we have. There are so many though, that I feel like we're just contracting the help to our athletes. Whereas and I realize why. And I realized I'm not a dietitian. I'm not a strength coach. I didn't get my, biomechanic, whatever, so we just teach like round offs and back handsprings and then we leave. Right. And then if you're struggling mentally, like go talk to the sports psych. And then, we have a counselor for that. And I'm like, the coach though still is the person that spends the most time with the athlete.
Correct.
And there's an inherent, we want to win, right? Like you were in competitive college athletics, but like, if I don't get all those other conversations to show the athlete that I'm invested in them and their process and that I care and build that trust, those are all other areas where we could have conversations outside of gymnastics to where I got to know this person. And I'm not a sports psychologist. I can't diagnose why you feel this way and then give you a prescription for how to feel. And, you know, I think that's really a hard science anyway, but like just the simple act of them like talking to me about how like, man, I'm really struggling with X, Y, and Z as we're going through this push is an incredibly valuable conversation to have with your athlete regardless. And so I feel like we're losing a little bit of that because we have all these amazing resources. And like you said, as the coach, now I'm having to find out that
through someone else.
Sometimes I can't even find out because of information disclosure laws, and, you know, and in some ways that's made it harder, I think, as a coach to get to really be able to like, because to push and drive your players to be amazing in the way that they want to be amazing. Because that's such a huge part of this piece. Like,
and I think the takeaway too is the extremes, right? I think that's where people get in the water is like that one extreme of like, I'm completely doing it all. I'm going to be a nutritionist and a strength coach and a gymnastics coach. And it's just like way too many plates and you fall apart. But the other extreme is like what you said, which is like set it and forget it. Like, oh, not my problem. I teach back handsprings. Like, I think you have to be in the middle. You have to be aware and use the resources, but also still be proactive of wanting to know people and understand them and really get nuanced. You know, I think that's the takeaway.
So like you just took my conclusion statement.
Sorry, I stole your thunder.
but that's exactly where I was leading, right? You just inferred it and delivered it as eloquently as you could, right? Like, which was perfect. Like, I'm struggle with finding that balance with the additional resources and staff that it's available. Because if you see someone struggling during practice a little bit here and there, that's okay. But like struggling all the time at all the like something bigger is going on here.
Yeah, right.
And I can't just, you know, you don't just want to be like, make sure you go see the counselor.
Dig in a little bit and figure out the human, right?
So insensitive and ridiculous. Like, how, you know, like I want, and more importantly, like I want to know, like if you're like not enjoying this process, and I tell my athletes this all the time, like I want to win more than anyone, but in the end, it's college athletics, and there's a lot of damn good teams out there. And if we don't walk away with the ring on our finger this year, I don't want it to be all for nothing. And then more important, like when we do win and we have a ring, the ring is garbage. It's a piece of metal, probably made in China. Why it is meaningful and why it matters is the stories that are embedded in that thing, which is the relationships and the journey that we went on from day one till now. And then I've seen that with my guys' teams. They come back and they're like, "Damn, that's a good looking ring. Remember that year when? Remember when coach did that?" Like, it instantly goes to the stories and the experiences that we went through to earn that thing. And then so on the other side, like if we don't earn one, you still got to have those experiences and those growth lessons, and those opportunities and those bonding moments, because then that was all worth it. It was all worth it because you had those things. And you don't get a ring for those things, but you'll remember and have those forever. And so like that's been
another crucial another crucial thing, right? Which is like the shiny thing you think is going to make you happy or make it all worth it will probably have a moment of like, damn, this is cool. But like, that's definitely not it. And I've been super lucky, man. I've worked with people who won Olympic gold medals, you know, CrossFit games, whatever. And like, it's cool. It's dope. But that like the grind and the journey of what I had to do to get here. And like you said, the story of who I am because of it and that relentless mindset, that's what's for sure, you know? So I think coaches need to understand that and pursue a goal that's meaningful, but not base someone's self-esteem or like their worth on like, did we win or not, you know?
And that's why you have to frame those tough moments. You have to allow them to be learning lessons, right? Like you don't just set them up to struggle because you know it's best for them to be the best gymnasts. Like those are also incredible life lessons that will serve them far beyond the scope of a sport and gymnastics, right? Like, so you have to let them pull those out, right? And draw those out. Like, and honestly, that's been one of the things I love the most is within the 20-hour rule of trying to get 6 events when ring strength takes an hour alone at the end of 3 practices. How do you get 6 events in? And you're training straight fig, which is the Olympic code. Like, what are you out of your mind fitting into the 20-hour rule in men's gymnastics? It's ridiculous. There's time now in women's to do these things. So I love that. Like we fit much cleaner into the 20-hour cap window of college of the NCAA requirement, and can still do all these things and do all these things. I love that, because that's always been where my passion has been is, you know, and not to pat myself on the back, but a lot of the, you know, I've had a lot of comments from our athletes, our you know, women gymnasts that have been in the sport for a long time say, hey, thanks for making gymnastics like fun again, like,
right.
and so to come back full circle, we asked like, men's gymnastics is totally different than women's. Like Ashley brought me here to bring a lot of men's gymnastics with me.
Yeah.
Right. Like, we are goofy and we do play around. And like the other day I was like making like ices, like in the middle of practice.
That was my next question.
It was our spring break before SECs. And it's just like, and so like I, like an idiot, was yelling at like on the bus ride to SECs, like spring break 23, let's go, like, yes, it's SECs, but like that doesn't mean it can't be fun. That doesn't mean it's fun to kick ass.
Yeah.
It's fun to walk in like a rock star and know you've got, your routine on lockdown. And to do that, it can be a grind, but I was also that way at morning conditioning. I was the asshole at 6 a.m. weights being like 6 a.m. weights. Woo! Yeah. No place I'd rather be. And there was some sarcasm to it, but like, I'd rather that than like, let's get
hoodie on, miserable in the corner. Yeah.
Like no one wants to be around that. So like, I just learned to kind of make light of the worst moments of my career, to the point that out of my 9 surgeries, every time I got a surgery, I was like, another vacation, baby. Like, all right, another, I needed a break, like, man. Like you can't dwell on it. It's just going to put you in a terrible set. So,
and I want to go back to something you said that's super important too, which is another highlight, which is like those moments of like when it feels the worst, where like it doesn't go the way you want. And it's just like, it feels like crippling. Like I call those emotional catalysts, man. If you can harvest the moment there and really like give it maybe a day or two to like not be so raw, but if you can come back to that as a coach and debrief that as an athlete and be like, what can we learn from this? Right. Like what can we harvest? Like that's where the most like momentum for change or positive slingshots happen. It's not in the greatest moments. It's in the darkest moments where it doesn't go the way you want, And
that's been said 1,000 different ways. And it's a message that you constantly have to keep repeating, because obviously it's in those moments where it's hardest.
Yes.
But it's like, what did you really learn when you felt perfect and the routine was easy?
Yeah.
Nothing. You just cruise through.
Yeah.
So like, that's when I'm going to challenge you the most to try to get a routine done. And this is, I think, is again, another polarizing difference from men to women is guys will a lot more readily grind through a gnarly routine and like land in a standing pike sitting, like, cause they just barely got to their feet and they were like, I didn't die,
That one and a quarter, you eat hard and still have to like front up rise, like, oh no.
Because that's so much built into the open-ended code and FIG points of men's gymnastics.
Yeah.
Like these women were physically prepared to hit their routines probably back in like November. And so like now it's all about every routine has to be perfect.
Yeah.
All the time. And like, man, that's a tough way to go through practices day in, day out.
Yeah.
It's like
a lot of pressure.
And so like getting them to realize that having to fight through or struggle through ones when you are still sore from the circuit yesterday is exactly the learning lesson that you need to learn so that you do feel invincible on the postseason floor.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like, because you're right. Like it's one of my favorite, I don't know who said it, but like how many straights or how many handstand push-ups do I need to do? Like, I don't know, but the only ones that count are the ones that are hard.
Yeah.
Like if you can do 20 easy, don't stop at 20. You don't get any stronger. You just maintained like the only ones that matter are the ones that start to get hard. Right. Like, and that's, I think, true in life. Like, but you just have to have the mind to be able to embrace that. To embrace the suck, right? Like you gotta learn to enjoy the suck. The people that are able to do that are the athletes that end up setting records, right? Like,
it's the grittiness, right? It's like that factor. And I actually was we had a couple college girls that were home and hear this now. I'm like, what percentage of like overall time is like come down to like, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it because I know it's towards my goal. I think all of us were like around 90%. I'm like, 90%
right?
Time, like, I didn't want to work out today. Not really. I don't want to like meal prep every week. Not really. I'd rather eat nachos and sit on my ass, of course. But like it serves a goal that I have. And I feel like it's better to accept that and realize it's going to be hard and build tools to deal with the hard than be like, you know what? We're going to coast through this. It's all going to be peaches and rainbows and never be hard. Like that's not going to happen,
Well, there's a forum for that. It's just not this one.
Yeah.
Like that's your neighborhood softball league or whatever. Like, but that's the problem is you get athletes that I think kind of are looking for that and then struggle with refine. It's easy to do that when you're driven towards the bigger picture. But then that's why getting your team on the same page for what you're doing, what we're doing, and what part do you play? What's your role in this? And I'm a big one that's like, I've always said that like your value and that you bring to this team isn't determined by the points you put up in a meet. Like we're really teaching that team dynamic lesson. I think that's why companies seek out student athletes, because they inherently have at least a little bit understanding of, if I'm not the star player, I still have a role and can serve and help my team be better from down here.
Right.
You get a team that understands that, your team is going to be amazing.
Yeah. And to that, a similarity between men's and women's is that in the club program, it's so individual. Like you can say it's team for your gym and your club.
Yeah.
Really individual. Exactly. You snap your fingers and you're in college where like the we matters more than the I. And that's like a crazy flip for a lot of people, which is like, it's great. It's motivating because I always would work harder for my team than I did for our own personal goal. Too. But at the same time, it's just like you have to like really kind of like culture shock yourself in the fact that like, well, maybe what's best for me is not being an all-arounder and being amazing on 3 events and training one more in case something happens. And like, maybe I'm just like, someone's having an amazing week. That's happened in college. Like someone's having an amazing week. They clearly have a better start value than me. I have to take the L and accept the fact that they're probably on and I'm probably off. And it's for the better of the team if that person goes and I don't. And then maybe next week it's a different story. But that would have never crossed my mind in club. My club is like always, all the time, no matter what, everything, everywhere, all at once,
And usually, certainly at a program like Alabama, like you were probably the best kid in your pro club.
Yeah.
And now you instantly are dropped into a program where you're maybe one of the best, right? And that's really hard by itself as well. And then you're supposed to help the girl next to you, like earn
who has your spot, right?
Her lineup spot over your, and I mean, I think that's the problem is when your identity or self-worth is tethered to these lineup spots.
Yeah.
You don't really feel like the fact that I just helped her become better is the same. Like, I guess that's where you get really deep. And that's where I think athletics can be really hard. It's like everything's tethered to playing time, right? Like,
right.
I think that's different. I think men and women handle that differently.
Sure. Yeah. I do love what you said.
Egos are.
Yeah, exactly. Quite large.
Big.
And I do like what you said, which is I don't want to paraphrase you the wrong way, but like essentially like your value to this team is not the score you give. It's like so much more than that, right? And of course that ties to the coaching side, which is that your value as a coach and a human being is not tied to the score of the team. Your win or that. And I think when everybody collectively, I'm a big believer that like these hierarchies kind of have a trickle down effect where the person who's the higher up or the leader, if they just take humility and teamwork and the team is better than I, that trickles down to the captains, which trickles down to the people, which trickles down to the people recruiting, looking up at the program, right? Because you can for sure see when certain groups or teams are collectively as Tom Farden says, pointing the finger versus pulling the thumb. And I really resonate with that a lot, which is like, is your first action to say it's all your fault no matter what? Or is it like, what did I do here? And you already explained that, which is like, oh, this is a problem on me. I didn't communicate enough. Whereas like a lot of coaches are like, it's always the athlete's fault. They didn't listen. They're not following along. They just don't want to work hard enough. It's like, well, maybe you have a communication, barrier there.
We haven't figured out how to get everyone on board. And then sometimes you might go back to like, the recruiting, but like, it's hard. Because it's you're under a pressure cooker, and so like everyone's under stress. But again, that's one thing that I knew about. Ashley might be one of the most calm and composed. I've seen her have a baby, take over a program in her first year, like as head coach. Like I can't speak to how. Like there were moments where I would have like
imploded.
Not imploded, but explode. Like I can be a really person. Like man, I'm like. I feel like I was just watching Gandhi in that moment. How did you keep your composure in that conversation for the 38th time in that moment? Like, it's incredible. So
it also speaks to the value of building people with opposing strengths and opposing personalities. Because like you're gonna be very resonant and communicate with one type of athlete who's also high energy, who also gets jazzed up, whereas Ashley's probably going to communicate with someone who's a little more introverted. And like if you come at them with your energy, it's going to be like just like curl up in a shell, And
having a social awareness to know that. Yeah, this isn't helping this person right now. Right? Like,
I got to go first here.
I'm going to go be crazy over here because they're loving this. Yeah, you got to know that.
Yeah, man. This is dope. I mean, I don't want to keep you more than an hour. I know you got stuff to do, but I guess we'll just end it with, what's exciting, what's to come. I mean, not to stamp the episode, but we're in the middle of the season right now. So what's exciting for you in the short term, and then also like the long view of Alabama and your role?
Well, short term, we're heading to regionals in a couple days. So
Can't wait to watch. Can't wait to watch.
Yeah, and that's exciting. I don't know, like short term and long term for me is the same thing. I'm wrapping, I guess, out my first recruiting year. And so I'm looking forward to like identifying and being a part of, not that we didn't do a lot of recruiting when I first got here. I haven't even finished a full year being part of the program. So I'm looking forward to wrapping that. I think there's a learning lesson around every corner, because there are subtle differences to this job than there was from being the head of a men's program in the Big Ten. Right. And so, but the long term is, I don't know. I really believe in what we're doing here. I thought about how to answer this question because I didn't know that I would love coaching women's gymnastics as much as I do. And I think a little bit of is like, I think that I've always loved the connection around being a part of a team. Like I chose to go to Illinois when I was a top recruit, purely because the team looked like it was the closest.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a big difference is, it's funny. I was just talking to Ashley about this beforehand. I'm like, how do I convey this without being like my old team was a bunch of jerks? And they're not. Like I had great connection with my guys. I missed them tremendously. It's just different with this women's team. And I think that you connect on a different level. And I really feel like I'm making a difference in that capacity. And I just feel like women, a lot of them didn't go to normal high schools. And so I think that they look at their sport as the place where they get their connection and kind of love for the sport and love, like in relationships. And that's always been such a huge piece for me in my life. And so I just look forward to continuing having that. Like I love our staff. Gina's a big, huge pillar to this thing too. And I don't know. That was very general, but I
know. It hits the nail on the head, man. There's something electric about when you're truly with a group of people who are close in pursuit of the same goal. You know what I mean? Like I felt that way at Springfield, D3 school, no scholarships going around, no special treatment. It's just like us and 20 other guys working our face off to try to be good, and that's like, it's cool to have people who are on the books. In club, I was like one of 3 10s and the like next one down was like 12 years old. It's like, it's not the same, when you have 20 people who are all the same and they're better than you, you know what I mean? Like that was crazy too. It's like, they're all better than me on certain things. Like, damn, I got some work to do here. It kind of fires you up a little bit.
Yeah. Hey, I love the stuff you're putting out too. Like again, when we started working landing mechanics and stuff like that and weight, like, people need to break the science down. They need to see it. Like, this concept of like, how do you get stronger if you're not adding weight? Right. Like, this belief that weights gets you injured. I'm like, this is crazy. So I just keep doing what you're doing. I believe in science, and I believe that your approach is helping us develop better, stronger, healthier athletes. So I love it. Keep doing it.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. And, I'm lucky. I'm very grateful. I work hard, but also like I got the right time at the right moment where people care. And so if I can help people, why not? I'll keep chugging away. I wish you the best of luck, right? It's gonna be great to watch you in the season. And I'm excited for the next, whatever billion years to come for you in the BAM program.
Thanks, Dave.
Take care.
Yeah. See you. Bye.